This week, I was delighted to welcome Dr. Lynette Ewart of Prescription Strength onto the podcast to talk about a subject very close to both of our hearts, the grift, the bullshit, and all of the misinformation that we see online within the wellness and fitness industry. We talked about the obsession with data and analytics, the ways in which certain influencers and companies prey on the insecurities of health-conscious people, magic hacks that do and don't work, and much, much more. If you like this episode, make sure you follow Lynette on Instagram because her content is very much in line with the things that we talk about today. Hope you enjoy it. Right, Lynette, welcome to the podcast. How is your week going?
Not bad, actually. It's probably a quieter week than I've had for a long time, thanks to Easter and kids demanding taxi lifts here, there and everywhere. It's been quiet in a different way from work. Yeah.
For some reason, the bank holiday completely threw me out and I've just compressed 5 days of work into 4 instead of taking the time off, which is not that helpful. Really excited to have you on and to get into something that I think we're both passionate about the kind of the trends that exist online in the wellness and the fitness industry. Before we get into all of that, can you tell me something cool or interesting that you've thought about recently or you've learned or read recently?
I can, and I did do a post about this, but it's probably got lost in the sea of other posts. I read an article about potentially preventing dementia being a midlife intervention, because there is lots of evidence that some of the physical changes in the brain that relate to dementia are evident long before the signs of dementia start presenting. And I've thought about this a lot. I want to cover it on my own podcast because people probably need to understand that better, but I want the right person to discuss it with. So that's what's been occupying a lot of my thoughts in the last probably 2 weeks, I would say, since I read. The article was in New Scientist magazine. So yeah, that's probably more random than you were expecting.
Well, it's probably more relevant than you were expecting because my dad has early onset dementia and he was diagnosed in his late 50s.
Right.
I did a YouTube episode about it a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing Trek 26 in my community in the Peak District in the summer for Alzheimer's Society. So there's a bit of happenstance there. Yeah. Can you please share that article with me? I'd be very, very interested in reading it.
Yes, I can. I can only screenshot it, but if you've got an iPad, then you can read it just because it's part of a subscription that I have to this multi-magazine thingy bob. So I can't link the article, but I can certainly send you a screenshot. And it is very interesting, and I will definitely cover it in the podcast. There's one particular person who I know is passionate about it, and he's agreed to come on. I just can't pin him down to a date. So watch this space. It will definitely get the airtime that it deserves, I think.
Cool. Thank you. Let's hope no one from New Scientist is listening to this. Will you screenshot it? I'm sure they're not. Tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do and all of that?
What do I do? Primarily, I'm a doctor. I think I've had to accept that is part and parcel of who I am. There's this whole debate of, is it a job or is it a vocation? And I think in the many times I've tried to step away from NHS work, not so much being a doctor, I have had to accept that it is now part of the fabric of who I am. But I am a doctor who is very interested. I've always been very interested in the online space, even going back 15 years or so. I would have been the person in the coffee room at work going, did you read this thing on Twitter? And everybody was just be like, no, we're not even on there. So maybe it was always written in the stars that I would end up moving more towards having an internet profile. But I got interested in strength training personally about 10 or 11 years ago, had some really good coaching. And during the time that I was being coached, remember saying to my coach many times, oh, if you could just get your hands on this patient or that patient, their life would be transformed. And to cut a very long story short, not finding the equivalent of her here led me to the realization that I was going to have to become that coach if I wanted people to get that same quality coaching and that same life-changing magic that comes from building strength. And that is how I came to found, should I say, Prescription Strength as a business, which initially my plan when I left my busy job as a GP partner was to buy premises and just own a gym and run very much a similar setting to what my own coach does. But that all coincided with COVID. It hasn't really happened. I still don't own any premises, but I did periodically think maybe I could reach more people online. And I am reaching far more people than I ever imagined online. So I now have these different roles whereby I still very much work in the NHS with a couple of different roles, but I'm a personal trainer who coaches strength training for mostly I work with beginners. And mostly they tend to be women and mostly they tend to be in midlife, but none of those things are an exclusive requirement. That's just how it's ended up. But also alongside that, as I began to learn a little bit about marketing, because one of the things when you work in the NHS, which if anybody has got that type of a job will know, is you never have to tout for business. The NHS is not short of customers. But when you start your own business, you realize that nobody can buy from you unless they know that you exist. And the obvious way to do that is through social media. So I seem to have caught a bit of an audience who like the way that I talk, which is very much who I am, straight talking. There isn't a lot of time in a 10-15 minute appointment with a patient to beat around the bush. So you get used to making your point quite quickly and condensing things in a way that people can grasp and hopefully understand. And it seems to have landed with an audience online as well. So hence why if people have seen any of the stuff that I'm prattling on about, they'll probably find it maybe a bit sweary, maybe a bit abrupt, but I'm just trying to get the point out before you lose people's attention, which is, that's what we've been doing in general practice for a lifetime. and now people do it through short form content. So that's a very long answer to a short question. Sorry.
Oh, that's good. It's good. Sweary and abrupt is welcome here and will be no surprise to the people listening. Is the plan still to build an in-person business alongside the online?
I've just been thinking this very thing this week, because at some point in the next couple of years, we need to move house. And that's when I think I will need to make a decision, because we have a garage gym. I don't really host clients here because sometimes it has to be a garage. I would like a smallish premises to be able to make better videos for my clients that demonstrate what I teach. I would like to be able to host perhaps small groups or events or seminars. But if I try and combine that with the next house, we're going to limit the pool of houses that we can choose from. And so I've just been thinking, how much do I want this? I think with anything, and one of the things I've learned from having a business, and I'm sure you're the same, is there's the stuff that people see, and then there's lots of stuff that you still have to do behind the scenes. And with an online business, that's relates to tech, doesn't it? And subscriptions and stuff to make your life easier. And I think with premises, there's probably a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff like maintenance and rent that I'm not seeing as part of my pipe dream. So I haven't decided, but I still like the idea of it. And I still get a huge pang of envy. I gave a talk at a gym. It's about half an hour from here a few weeks ago. And I was drooling at the premises thinking, oh, I'd love to own this and hang out in it and it just be mine. But he's there 6 days a week from 6 a.m. He doesn't get home till probably 7:30, 9 at night. And they think, that's the bit that I'm not seeing when I just swan in and talk to his clients about strength training and women's related stuff. So I don't know. I haven't fully decided.
I think there's something very cool about being able to bring people together in person that is underrated when you're working online. Most people aren't doing it. And I'm thinking a lot naturally in the last 12 months or so about how to build an AI-proof business. And bringing people together in person and like fostering that community side of things it's just proved to be invaluable. So I did our first in-person event last month. Okay. Only a small group of us, but it was absolutely brilliant to like meet guys that I've been communicating with and working with online for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So I think having something like that is really powerful. And if you've got your own space, obviously that just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Interesting.
What do you love most about your work?
The helping people improve their health with really simple interventions. I get so fed up of all the overcomplicated, majoring in the minor-y type bullshit that gets spread around. And and I still tap into this sometimes as a doctor. An example would be you've seen somebody who's got a really bad back and demonstrating to them a simple way in which they can brace and sit down without aggravating that back pain or getting out of bed. Really simple stuff that they go, oh, wow. That I can't believe what a difference that's made. Somebody with signing somebody off who's really stressed and going, do you know what? Your prescription is you need to walk for an hour every day. No negotiation. Get your trainers on. Don't care what the weather is. That is as much a part of your prescription as the one you're going to collect at the pharmacy. Every single patient comes back and goes, I'm sure that worked just as much as the tablet. Well, not everybody wants to take tablets, but it's that simplicity. And then people coming back and going, oh, I felt much better after I spoke to you. And that's the bit. When I decided to do this, I knew that was the bit that I was chasing. And every time I pull back from clinical work for a while, that's the bit that I miss. But I get that with coaching now. And one of my clients who did my 8-week group program said she's 70 and she struggles with something called fibromyalgia. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a chronic pain condition and it's a bastard. But 8 weeks of a really simple structured strength program. And she said, I'm getting up pain-free for the first time in years. And I was like, yes, no drugs, no fancy complicated programs, no boot camps, just a simple program. And I love that. You can't bottle that. And AI will never be able to do that.
Awesome. Why do you think that complexity exists? Why do you think there is a kind of trend towards complexity?
Because how do you sell boring? How do you sell the boring basics? You can't. So, and also, I think the fitness space, it's not that complicated. But to make yourself seem exceptional, if you've not got an exceptional personality or niche or something or story that sells, then people try and sell themselves through complexity. And I'm seeing this everywhere in that make it seem complicated so that I've got the solution for you, whether that's lowering your cholesterol or being able to get up from a chair without using your hands. There's just this kind of trend towards giving it fancy names, dipping into scientific terminology and making it part of the lingo, so that, I've got the answer. You need me. I'm going to fix you. No, you don't. This is how you do a simple, sit to stand from a chair. Give that away for free. And I wish people would realize that actually, if they like you and trust you, they'll believe you. You don't need to make it more complex, but, it sells, doesn't it? So I don't know. That's the only sense I can make from it, watching it from the sidelines. I don't know if you've got a different view on it, but it seems to be just about selling.
The big one amongst my target audience, midlife guys at the moment, is hormone optimization with blood panels, special supplements, which may work to improve your testosterone or lower your cortisol, but not for the reasons that people think. The reason that it works is because you lower your body fat, you start resistance training 3 times a week, you move more, you start eating more protein and improve your diet. You don't need like blood panels to do that. You do that for 3 months and your hormones will improve. And if they don't, then that's a reason to get a blood panel.
So, and that's a really interesting point because this comes up in both of my worlds. So sometimes I'll meet a patient. Let's take the person who knows deep down they're drinking a bit too much. So they come and they want some bloods. For whatever reason, they feel that they need to see evidence that they're drinking too much before they take action. And that can very spectacularly backfire because if your bloods come back completely normal and the range of normal, particularly on something like a liver function test, is huge. I've seen patients with almost liver failure and have completely normal liver function tests. So I would always push back and say, okay, so what do we do if the result's abnormal? Well, then I'm going to change my lifestyle. Okay, why not just change it anyway? Why do you need to see data in order to drive your behavior? But some people do. Some, which is why they're getting bloody sleep trackers or requesting at-home testing kits. So if it doesn't give you the data that you want, are you just going to take that as a signal of, well, I'm fine then, until there's a problem, I won't do anything about it? They haven't really actually asked themselves, what is the problem I'm trying to fix? So I'm not a great believer in lots of tests for tests' sake, because You have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with the result when you get it? And if the result is, right, I'm going to clean up my diet, I'm going to probably try and get on top of my stress, which is out of control, move a bit more, hopefully lift a few weights. You don't need data to do that. You'll feel better if you do those things, irrespective of what the data tells you. But hey, we've got a massive market for at-home testing and optimization, and the data nerds love it. And, we're in a generation of data nerds now, aren't we? Yeah.
I think the fitness and the wellness industry prey on the insecurity of their target market, because once you become aware of your health and wanting to improve your health, most people start with general goals of, I want to lose a little bit of weight, I want to be a bit stronger, a bit fitter, have a bit more energy. But it's very easy to start there and then go down the rabbit hole of, oh, but what about this thing and what about this? And that's what I think leads to that obsession with data and analysis and optimization, which the big fitness tech companies know. So they prey on that. Well, what about your heart rate variability score? What about your recoverability? All this data. And I agree with you. Like, what are you actually doing with that? Is it meaningful? I actually, when I I started trying to hack my testosterone and growth hormone by focusing on my deep sleep. And Fitbit was telling me your deep sleep score or percentage is way below men your age. So that made me really anxious about it. So I was like, well, I'm going to take supplements. I'm going to optimize my sleep. It just gave me insomnia for months because I was so anxious about it. And I was sleeping fine before then. It was only because I started becoming aware of it that I've started fixating on it and then made things worse for months.
And that trend is seen across the board. And the reality is, with sleep trackers, even the Aura Ring, which is horrendously expensive and ties you into a subscription, is the validated data is really poor when you compare it with a proper sleep study where they've got electrodes on your brain and are properly monitoring, what's going on in your EEG while you're sleeping. So the chances are you'll get a lot of anxiety and not a lot of very useful data. And you run the risk, as you've already experienced, and I have too, I'd used them for a very short period of time, overriding, I feel all right this morning, with, apparently not. It looks like I've not. So it's a real phenomenon. And I think as well, just going back to what you were saying about people wanting to feel better, one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes it's not enough for some people to just feel better. And I wouldn't say I see this in my patients, but I do see this in the fitness space, that people, they've already reached a decent physique. They're maybe sleeping okay. And they're generally, their energy levels are good, but it's not enough. And so they want a bit more and a bit more, and they don't know where to go. And this is where, you get personalized nutrition's probably, I shouldn't hit on that because that can be quite useful. There's a lot of individual variability with food, but this personal supplementation is just nonsense. And as for hormone optimization, I mean, there is no standard of normal. If you zoom out and look at what hormones are, they are information and they are meant to kind of rise and fall and vary. And just because you feel good when they're in a certain place, the idea that you can freeze yourself in that particular part of the month or year or whatever is nonsense. What goes up must come down. And that is just part of how physiology works. But no, that doesn't sell very well. The idea that, you felt great for a few weeks and now I'm afraid you're on the other side of that curve. No one's selling any packages on the back of that, are they? Oh, God.
So I love your content. I love the way that you call out a lot of the bullshit and the things that we're talking about here. What trends are you seeing? I mean, we've talked about some of them, but are there any others that you're seeing at the moment across social media and across health and wellness more generally?
I think what you're seeing for men with regards to testosterone is it's probably worse in women. So we're probably coming to the end of peak menopause propaganda, and there's the camp that if you are not taking HRT as a woman in midlife, you are missing out on all these potential preventative benefits. Now that bothers me as a doctor, because what we do have evidence for is that HRT can be very good for managing certain symptoms, but the data about prevention is much more sketchy. Now, hormone fanatics will say, yeah, but that's because the data's not been done. And I accept that. Historically, the studies have been a bit shit. But nonetheless, if we look at what data we have got, this idea that you are missing out if you are not taking HRT to prevent dementia and protect your bones, it's a bit of an exaggeration. But I do think it's the balance is leveling out a little bit, or at least in terms of what I see. And I think mainstream medicine or mainstream general practice has had to pull its socks up a little bit when it comes to female hormones and improve access. It's still got a room for improvement, definitely. But I do a lot of GP appraisals among peers, and every year you have to set objectives for the next year. And I see a lot of GPs, particularly male doctors, going, I need to upskill in hormone management for women because the demand has gone through the roof. So I'm pleased about that. But what's moving in to replace it is the stupidity. I can't even call it a medical specialty, but this longevity space, longevity medicine, it's not even a thing. It's an internet movement. This idea that you can take supplements that we know exist naturally, boost them. I hate the word boost because it's a meaningless term. Boost them, and somehow you'll be rewarded in 30 years by just being bulletproof. I mean, it's a nonsense, but my God, it's really seductive, and it's everywhere at the moment. And I think you're probably seeing it more. I imagine your algorithms are much more skewed towards male marketing, but I think probably the longevity thing is reaching as many men as it is women. Women, it's still slightly skewed more toward aesthetics and collagen. I've made no secret about the bullshit marketing that exists for collagen, and we can certainly talk about that if you want to. But my worry is that this new longevity nonsense is really taking hold, and it's just a promise. It's a promise with no data to support it. Yeah, just trust me on this. Take this NMD, is it, and an NAD, and
yeah,
and your reward will come in heaven. It's all a bit bullshitty, if you ask me.
resveratrol as well, I think, was the other one. I fell into that trap. I read David Sinclair's book, and then he talks about those supplements, and I was like, well, obviously I need to take these. They're so expensive. It was like £100 a month or something. So I did it for a month or two. Obviously realised I was getting no benefit from doing it. I might have got benefit if I'd kept going for 30 years.
For 30 years, yeah. and I don't want to come across in a way that people, if they have bought into it, feel daft, because I have done this. In fact, I was just reflecting, I need to clean the fish tank out today, and I was thinking there's a post in that, because I remember taking spirulina for a while, and it literally, every time I clean the fish tank, I remember what that revolting stuff tasted like. And a post came up the other day with this woman talking about how nutritious algae is, and if you take these 10 capsules a day, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, yeah, there's a post in that. So I've done it too, but I did it at different time. I really got into the fitness space probably about 10 years ago, and it was tamer then. But yeah, I bought the spirulina. I've done some of the fads that were around then. I've just now been around it long enough to see the fads come and go. And it didn't then encroach upon my medical job as much as it does now. And I think that's probably why I take it so personally, that I feel like we get called out as doctors by the wellness industry for being behind the times, for not keeping up with the data and withholding these secret things from people. Of course we're not. It's utter bullshit. If cabbage juice fixed stomach ulcers, which was one I called out the other week, somebody would have noticed by now. We're not daft. So it's I do take it a bit personally, and that's where some of my pushback comes from.
Yeah, I think it's easy to fall prey to these things. When I read that David Sinclair book, I think it was the year I turned 40 or 41. So, there's nothing, it's just an arbitrary number really, but obviously people think midlife, I'm getting older. So it's no coincidence. I read it then and I was like, well, you mean I can hack my health and I can look 10, 20 years younger? Of course I'm going to do that. I think that we're in the age of information overwhelm, and information's not really valuable anymore. It's just a commodity. There's too much of it. You can find conflicting solutions to the same problem. And we've all had that thing. We look for a solution to something online and we find one person saying something and one person saying the polar opposite. And I think as coaches and business owners in this industry, our role is now as much about like taste and authenticity and filtering good information from bad. What do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I think you're bang on. And I think if I was to summarize what people come to me for, whether that's to request coaching or whatever, but I get lots of replies to my emails. I do a weekly newsletter, and every Monday evening I'll sit and Tuesday morning and go through the replies. And you've hit on exactly the themes that come through. People are overwhelmed with information. They're confused about who to trust, which isn't helped by med influencers who grow an audience and then want to cash in on it. Maybe someone will accuse me of that someday, but I'm very mindful to protect it. And they don't know who to trust, and they will. I think this is part of why my audience has grown, is that it's pointing out how people can monetize your attention and how they shortcut to trying to sell you something, even if it's not obvious in that post. I think back when we all relied upon TV and newspapers and magazines, nobody thought any worse of a celebrity who was suddenly selling a car or promoting trainers or something like that. It was all very upfront. And I feel like now it's much more underhand. And I'll use Davina McCall as an example, just because I did a post about her. She's I don't know whether she's invested in a company called Ancient and Brave or whatever, but she certainly works for them and promoting their collagen products. But she will record a reel, which is basically an advert, but it's dressed up to look like a reel. So she was getting ready for a weekend and waving the sachet of the collagen around and going, mustn't forget my essential collagen for the weekend. And if you look down, it did say #ad at the bottom, but you wouldn't have really looked at that because she looked very beautiful and her hair was all really nice. And lots of people were commenting on how well she looked. And to me, that feels slightly deceptive. And it's not that celebrities aren't entitled to earn money from what they do, but this attempt to dress it up as something that's just, look at me. This is how I look. Never mind the fact that I've got a hairdresser husband and a whole team of makeup artists around me. It just feels more deceptive than it used to online. So people don't know who to trust because instinctively they like Davina. They know her. She's familiar. She's been coming into their TV for years on end. So if she says you can look as good by taking this collagen and people want to trust that, but then they're taking it for 3 months and going, I haven't noticed anything, they've got this crisis of trust. And so when I do a post and goes, this is an advert, she is just being paid to tell you that, like she would have been if it was on TV, people kind of feel a bit stupid. And they shouldn't feel stupid because marketing is a massive, powerful, big industry. And I'm vulnerable to it with gadgets. Jesus, I've got a graveyard of gadgets, as I say to people all the time. So I think we have got a crisis, not only of information, but this difficulty now of where can you get trusted information, especially then when you go to your doctor and your doctor's out of touch, maybe, doesn't want to get involved online. And I've been saying to friends who are doctors who go, oh God, I'm not on TikTok. Well, your patients are. So it's not enough to just go, I'm not interested in that online world.
Yeah.
The world has changed, and we need to keep up as a medical profession if we want to maintain trust and respect to a large degree and not cash in. So I get people to run it through a filter of what could this person be trying to sell me? And you may want that thing. It's not that selling is all bad, but if it's dressed up as something else, then I'm just trying to get people to kind of perhaps filter it a little bit as to what it might be being sold, because overwhelmingly, people say, well, we don't know who to listen to, even with something as basic as starting some exercise. For menopausal women, it can be, oh, you don't want to do that. That's going to raise your cortisol. You need to do this instead. What? Excuse me? Where does cortisol shit come from? So it's the Wild West, and I don't see it getting any better, if I'm honest. I think my profession needs to step up and be more visible and stop hiding behind this, I don't want to be online, and say what we've been saying in the consulting room for a long time. I don't think that's going to happen either.
It can sometimes be even more nefarious than a subtle product placement or an advert, because a lot of the big podcasts in this space are like extended adverts for products
Yeah.
or supplements or anything else.
I saw a really good clip by Mark Manson. I'm not overly into his content and not for any reason. It just doesn't really land with me. But there was a clip he was talking about how the podcast world, she says, on a podcast with her own podcast, and you've got a podcast. But I've seen this and I've seen it. People do the circuit and there's no challenge. There is no challenge to what they're saying because, you don't get paid for appearing on a podcast. It's all reciprocal and people use it as a promotional tool. And one of the reasons I've got frustrated with a very well-known GP's podcast, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, I was very, I was quite admiring of what he did at first. But as the podcast has grown and the output's increased, people come on and make these claims about things and it goes unchallenged. And I think, as doctors, we are trained in critical thinking. You can respectfully challenge people and go, but I don't think that would have worked with a number of my patients. It doesn't need to be rude, and you can warn people that you're going to do it. But this Mark Manson clip showed me why that doesn't happen. And it's just that people would stop coming on. They wouldn't come on and feel safe to have a conversation with you if they felt that they might be called out. And I thought, right, mental note, never let my podcast become that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I used to listen to his podcast loads, and I haven't listened to it for a long time, so I didn't know it had gone down that route.
I think it's a volume issue, isn't it? I think if you're going to put out 2 episodes a week at that scale and that quality, you need to have be very open to guests. And there's nothing wrong with having a variety of opinions. But the only person I see in the space, Joe Rogan will challenge people, I think. Yeah, I know he's been criticised, but there's a guy who's big on YouTube called Dr. Mike, who people go on his podcast and make scientific claims that are unfounded. They know full well they're going to get challenged, and some are up for it. But I think it's a pity. It's a pity there's not more like that in that space. But that's the way it's becoming online, isn't it? Echo chambers everywhere, and tribes.
But it shouldn't all be on the consumer to have to figure out the good from the bad, and it feels like it is the responsibility of the individual, which is a bit depressing. But equally, some of this is within our control as consumers. So what do you think are the red flags people should look out for when they're consuming information and they're asking themselves, is this actually viable? Is it valid? Or is it complete bullshit?
First of all, the credentials of the person who's talking to you. So there is an authority bias that comes with having a big following. And I do this as well. So I was just looking at, there's a twat of a guy who keeps showing up on my Instagram, talks utter bullshit. But he's got nearly 500,000 followers. And there's some credible people that follow him. And he does this typical thing of taking some scientific language and something that is quite plausible. And if you listen to it to the end, there'll be something that just doesn't quite make sense. And who is he? Who's his background? And it's very easy to put the name of that person, into Google or into AI and get a little bit of digging. So if somebody has never worked with the public, and then that for me is a red flag. If you're saying to me, this supplement or this product can cure all manner of symptoms, but they've only ever worked with a really little niche population of people, then the chances are it hasn't really been tested. If they're calling themselves doctor but don't say what type of a doctor, that's a massive red flag. Dr. Mindy Peltz is a perfect example of somebody who is a chiropractor. Now, that's not to say that she's not knowledgeable in chiropractic, but she talks about working with thousands of women. Well, who are these women? Where have they come from? And are they a skewed niche population that are already bought into your fasting is everything kind of rhetoric? And therefore it just becomes this one giant echo chamber. But she's got several million followers and got lots of books published. So I think it's about who the person is and what makes them credible. And then what it is that what lens are they looking at it through? And this is a bit more complicated. So one of my clients sent me a YouTube video yesterday, and it's from the Zoe podcast. And Zoe's interesting because obviously the main founder is Professor Tim Spector, who is a respected rheumatologist, and he's got a very credible background in research. So when I hear him talk as a doctor, he makes a lot of sense, and I can respect a lot of what he says. And some of his books I've enjoyed. Not all of them, but he's got lots of books. So you're not going to like everything. And however, the lens that he now looks at everything through is through gut health.
Yeah.
And that's his world. And I think the gut health science is fascinating. I'm not against it, but it's also very new. But if somebody's only looking at things through a gut health lens, they become blind to everything else because you can only take in so much. And he's no longer working with the general public. He's working with a population of Zoe subscribers who are a certain class and have got a certain amount of spare income and are already bought into the idea that if I eat well, it will improve my health. And it doesn't necessarily make it completely invalid, but it does give you a skewed picture. So when he then pops up on a mainstream podcast and, you know, diminishes the value of protein, I find myself going, oh, because he would have you prioritize fiber, because in his world, everything to do with fiber helps your gut health, and therefore he's seeing good benefits. But he's not seeing perhaps the 60-year-old lady who has a croissant for breakfast, and a little bit of a salad for lunch. And, she's basically under eating protein and would feel a lot better and a lot more satiated and get more out of the bit of training that she started if actually she got some more protein in her diet. So again, everybody's got a particular lens that they're looking through, and it can really skew their messaging. And if they've got a massive platform, it amplifies the message disproportionately to what we actually know from the data, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And I think Tim Spector's a really good example of someone who probably started off when he started talking about nutrition with fairly moderate, sensible views, but has become more and more polarizing and extreme because being more dramatic creates more of an audience and creates more hype. And the thing that drives me round the bend with the likes of Tim Spector and those other nutritionists who talk about like optimizing every ounce of your diet is two things. Firstly, ignoring the behavior change aspect of it. Like someone who is just starting to become more health conscious is likely to get really confused and stressed out if you tell them don't eat fruit after 7 p.m. or actually you shouldn't be eating more protein or no sugar or whatever because of gut health or whatever other thing it might be. And most people just need to do a bit better with their nutrition and start there rather than focusing on, well, actually this chicken breast is marinated and it's got a couple of ingredients on the back I don't recognize. Is that actually unhealthy?
Who cares?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. It's focusing on the minute details and then ignoring the big picture. And the other one, which you also just touched on, is the privilege of the people that he's working with. Like, so he's not cheap. He's working with a certain type of person in a certain type of role with a certain amount of expendable income. And you can't scale that across the entire population. And we've all got different circumstances, different histories, different situations. That means that you just can't talk with that level of certainty about how methods that you've shown to work can necessarily work for other people.
Yeah, it's the healthy user bias. And this is always the issue, is that people who can afford Zoe, and let's face it, the things you can buy in the shops now for Zoe are in Waitrose and they're in Marks and Spencer's. They are not in Aldi and Lidl and Iceland. And for some people, they might be needing to do the best they can do, and all they've got access to is Aldi and Iceland. And actually, you can do okay. So it's not that it's not necessarily valid, but like we say, he's gone from a position of being quite generalist and lent into the audience. I suppose it's audience capture to some extent. And that happens. That is part of the process. And so I've had some pushback for being critical of some of the things that he said when I felt there's been a bit of overreach. He made this claim about how beetroot can lower blood pressure. Well, it can. But are you going to eat beetroot every day in the same way that you take a blood pressure pill? I have not met anybody that's willing to commit to beetroot in that way for the sake of their blood pressure. So I took the piss out of it a little bit. And I got some pushback because he's got a loyal following, and that's fine. But they said, oh, come on, people have to eat better. Yeah, they do. But what does eating better look like? What's your starting point, because if your breakfast is a Greggs sausage roll, and your lunch is a meal deal from the petrol station, there's some low-hanging fruit that you can start with there. You don't need the Zoe Daily 30 in order to achieve optimal health. But that's that thing again of people that are already healthy, probably already exercising, probably doing the basics quite well, want to optimize a little bit further. Well, fine. If you can afford it, sign up to whatever subscriptions to Zoe that you want. But as I was saying to somebody earlier in the week, I still see financial harm as a harm, even if something's very safe. And collagen's the perfect example, is that, collagen supplements are quite safe. There's no reported cases of toxicity, although apparently they taste horrible. But the amount of emails I've had from people grateful that they've been able to let go of a £50, £60 a month subscription. In fact, what somebody said to me last week, I'm going to book a holiday with all the money that I've saved from these subscriptions. Thank you so much. I said, I may just rebrand myself as the Martin Lewis of the health and fitness space. But these people were taking these subscriptions and almost going, I'm not really notice anything. So then they felt like they needed permission to let go of it almost. And they not external permission, to give themselves permission to go, do you know what? I am right. It isn't doing anything. And that this constant loud repetitive messaging makes people second guess themselves a little bit. So they go, well, I don't know, Davina feels good and she looks great. So I'll just get another month's worth and see if it all falls into place. Whereas actually what I would say to somebody in general practice is, I don't know, if someone's on the fence about HRT, for example, keep an open mind, try it for 3 months, make notes along the way. Let's see what happens. You need 3 months to determine whether or not this is going to make any difference. And if you are satisfied that at 3 months, it's more benefit than not, great, there's your answer. If not, stop it, come back to it at another time. And I think that's a very neutral, I wouldn't quite say scientific, but at least it's an objective way of going, I'm going to give this quarter of the year, try it and see what happens. But you're not going to do that when you sign up to your 12-month subscription to get a 40% discount from whoever, I don't know, Elevate fucking superfood shite, that company. Yeah.
So I've got a couple of my clients in mind listening to this going, wait, I take collagen, and then they might take it for tendon health or like the joints, things like that. What's wrong with collagen? Or what?
It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. And essentially, what is collagen? It is a few amino acids, basically. So the idea that you can take collagen and somehow your body knows to break it down, put it in your bloodstream, what does it do? Tag it and send it to your cartilage in your right knee, but the left knee is not worn out yet, so we don't need it there. Or no, actually, we want those particles to go to your skin. It's just a nonsense. It gets digested down into its component parts, like everything else that you've had for your lunch, and your body will decide where it's needed. So the marketing claims that we can boost skin elasticity, regenerate cartilage. Cartilage hasn't even got a blood supply. The only way you're getting nutrients into your cartilage is with movement and replenishing your synovial fluid. It just doesn't, it's not even plausible, but the marketing is powerful. So I've done several posts about the futility of taking collagen. And then there was an article in the BBC at the start of the year where the article said, and a new meta-analysis has looked at all the collagen studies and it does seem to be beneficial. And I was doing an out of hours shift and as I was waiting for the computer to upload, I opened Instagram, had a ton of messages about it going, well, what do you think about this article now? Because the BBC have said it does do something. And immediately I just thought, if you put shit studies into a meta-analysis is a review of all the studies. If you put shit in, you're going to get shit out. But I thought I'll do my, necessary groundwork before replying. Spent a little bit of time looking into it, and it was exactly that. It was that you've got these industry-funded small studies over a short period of time where they haven't stated who was in the control group, who was in the trial arm, what methods. Sometimes they've mentioned the methods they've used to assess the skin improvements. It's much more difficult with joint health. But actually, these studies don't stand up to industry standard. And that makes sense because they're only ever going to be funded by the manufacturers. But
Yeah.
I was vindicated by a recent episode of Sliced Bread on Radio 4, which is always worth a listen. And they looked at the same studies again. They once looked at it, I think it was 2022, and basically came to exactly the same conclusions that I did. And I was thinking, yeah, I do know what I'm looking at when I look at trial data. And so if people have felt benefits from collagen, and I've had one or two people who push back, well, I definitely noticed some improvements. Fine. It's likely then your diet was probably a bit low in quality protein beforehand, but collagen isn't even a good quality protein, to be honest. It's pretty piss poor. So if you've got people taking it, if they're happy with it and they can afford it, and there is no, because it's safe, it's not a risk, but it's not cheap.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Yeah. So I would say just buy some more weights with it.
Interesting. While we're on it, then let's get your opinion on some other trends. I'm just going to throw these at you, and you just tell me what you think of them.
Okay. Yeah.
Cold plunges and cold showers.
Okay. Interesting. I think for the majority of people, it won't do very much. The exception will be, I think, people who really struggle with anxiety. The advantage of exposing yourself to cold water is a really useful way of training your panic response. But I'm talking about a small subset of people here, because if you've tried it, and I've tried it, the urge to panic when you suddenly are in freezing cold water is really quite overwhelming, and you have to fight hard to control your breath. And I think that is a fantastic way that people who are prone to panic attacks can almost induce that feeling and get a little bit of practice in. And I think for that very specific niche reason, it's probably quite useful. Some people like the invigorating feeling of it. You do get a natural release of endorphins that are quite short-lived. But I think for the average person doing it because they think they're going to get some longevity benefits, I don't think you'll find anything to back that up. But a little bit of pain tolerance and is not a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm a huge fan of encouraging people to do things that are mildly uncomfortable or they perceive to be quite difficult, that are low risk, that actually prove to them that they are capable of getting out of their comfort zone. And I'm also a big fan of having some sort of practice that kind of grounds and centers you. And if that's cold, then great. But agreed, there's no like magical hack there or magical benefit.
But it's definitely something to test yourself with. I've done it. Yeah.
What about blood glucose monitors?
Oh, fucking. Are you a diabetic? No, do not. There is no value in this. There is no value, and this has been studied in terms of, we know that glucose spikes are part of normal physiology. They are not something to be feared. If you have got a very high risk of metabolic disease, or you've already been told you are pre-diabetic and you cannot really see the low-hanging fruit in your diet, you think you're doing everything okay, there may be a learning exercise for a couple of months, because some people do respond differently to certain, particularly starchy carbohydrates. But again, this is a small subsection of people. If you are metabolically healthy, if you are a Zoe user, eating good quality food, or anybody that's eating real food most of the time, and by real food, I mean, it's obvious what it is. You don't have to read some sort of ingredient list to get a sense of when it was created. Then normal glucose spikes are part of being a human being, and the body is adapted very, very well to deal with it. You knowing what it's doing after you've eaten a banana is unlikely to be useful data. And when it's been studied, it hasn't shown it translates into any meaningful health outcomes whatsoever. So save your money unless you are a complete data nerd. But again, what are you going to do with that data once you've got it?
Become fearful of a normal bodily process.
Yeah, never eat another ice cream again. I mean, do you want a life without ice cream? I would like to have the odd piece of cake and the odd ice cream. What life do you want to build for yourself? A prison of rigid food rules because that made your glucose spike to 13 instead of 9? Oh, fuck off. No.
I also think, I often think about the idea that the people who are stressing about that kind of thing are increasing their stress. And maybe they've got a higher level of low level cortisol, for example, that might be shortening their lifespan, offsetting any benefit they're getting from the extra 2% that the nutritional optimization is giving them.
And the reality check that I get with every single NHS GP clinic is that the people that need to pay attention to what they're eating, they're just not even, they're not even hearing what our conversation today. The people that are listening to this, they're already bought in. They'll be doing the 80% already. The other 20% doesn't really matter. Spoke to a lady the other week from out of hours who was stuck on the floor. She was a bariatric patient. She'd had a fall getting something out of the tumble dryer. I was taking the call because she'd rung an ambulance and the ambulance had passed it through to out of hours. She was quite safe, so she wasn't prioritised. And I just rang and said, has this happened before? Oh, yeah, I've been stuck on the floor loads of times, but she needs a particular mobile bit of kit to come and get her up off the floor because of her size. And, that's the reality out there, people. Outside of the fitness space, this is what's going on. We have got much bigger fish to fry than whether or not your glucose spikes after a banana or a sandwich that wasn't the right type of bread. I mean, it's just not real world.
What about fasting?
Fasting, yeah. Fasting, I see it as a tool. And I'm really bad at it, so I have a bias, and we've always got to bias things. I don't tolerate hunger very well. However, I would get, if one of my clients said to me, what do you think about fasting? I would say, well, it's a tool. If you're using it as a tool for weight loss and it's temporary, then what do you think is going to happen when you stop the fasting and that breakfast goes back in and you've effectively just increased your pool? So if people are using it for weight loss, I think it's going to be quite time limited. If people are using it for health benefits, my reading of the data is that to do it for long enough to get the perceived health benefits, these kind of day-long, sometimes up to 3 or 5 day fasts, you are trading off significant amounts of muscle mass. And so unless you've got plenty in the bank already, I think any health benefits for your gut and your microcellular level processes are going to be traded off against the potential for quite a lot of muscle loss from fasting for 5 days. So I think it's very limited as a tool. I respect it in terms of religious practice and people who just, I think what it's done is free people up from this idea that they need to eat breakfast, because some people just don't want to. And I think that's fine. You don't want to eat until lunchtime and that just suits you better. There's no problem with that at all. You can call it fasting, you can call it skipping breakfast or whatever, but it's been leveraged to imply that there are some amazing health benefits, and I'm not convinced that they are not without their trade-offs elsewhere.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to say that I like that it's normalized, the idea that you don't have to eat 3 meals a day. You could eat 4 or 2 or even 1 if you want to, and lifestyle first is the way to dictate that. Do you think any atrophy could be offset by resistance training and eating enough protein after a fast?
Depends how long it is. I think people, again, I come back to Mindy Peltz, who was on the Diary of a CEO podcast, which, let's face it, is it's probably almost as big as Joe Rogan now. And she claimed to have cured her Achilles tendonitis with a 5-day water fast. And it was laughable that there is just no mechanism by which that could help. But, big platform, both of them. And that is a nonsense. Could you do a 5-day fast and do some resistance training? I think the quality of that training would be so poor. And I would question, if one of my clients was proposing doing that, I would say, what are you trying to achieve? What is the goal here? Because if something is starting to go, well, this, that, and the other, zoom out. What are you wanting to achieve? If you're wanting to introduce fasting to manage your weight, not lose weight, but manage it long term, and you don't particularly like eating breakfast, you're golden. That's fine. Off you go. If it's a temporary thing and actually you'll be a bit ratty for half of the morning, well, what's the point? What are you trying to achieve here? I think everything that I do with people, both with patients and with clients, is I try and get them to run it through a sustainability factor. Can you do this long term? If not, what's the bloody point of even starting, honestly? Because we see this with weight loss. You'll probably work with people who are trying to manage their weight long term, and it comes up with weight loss injections all of the time. It's a whole other topic. If it's a temporary tool, you need to have a plan for what's going to replace it afterwards. And fasting If you just like that way of life, great. If it's a temporary tool, then I don't know. What's your plan for when you're done with it?
Yeah, I've just I used it years and years ago before it was kind of normalized. I'm not trying to sound cool. I was just really interested in that kind
Well,
of thing.
Michael Mosley popularized it, didn't he? What,
Yeah,
10, 15 years ago? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Before that, even. And I just settled into that kind of 16A way of eating just because it suited my lifestyle. I'll like
Mm,
have a protein shake after training and then eat later in the day, and
mm.
I've just kept up with that.
Yeah.
What about apple cider vinegar?
Great in a salad dressing, but that's where it belongs. Honestly, this won't die, this myth, will it? And I think it's interesting because we come back to the healthy user bias. So people who think or believe that there are weight loss secrets hidden within the bottle of apple cider vinegar will find little tiny shreds of evidence. I think it's bad for your teeth. The idea of drinking vinegar is just nonsense for me, but it is fermented, and there may be some slight microbiome benefits from the fermented particles within it, but just stick it on a salad. I just don't know why you would drink olive oil in a shot, or why you would drink any kind of vinegar for that matter, unless you're weird and you love it, in which case fill your boots, but don't do it in the belief you're going to get some amazing health hack from it. I don't believe you can hack health. I think it's, that will be the title of my book.
Yeah, you've just reminded me that coconut oil was a big thing because of the MCTs, and there was a time where people were, including me, putting coconut oil in my black coffee in the morning, thinking that's going to help me with fat loss. What?
I tried that as well, in the same belief, thinking, well, everybody's doing it. And I've been I've been in that cult, and I've survived, and I've come out to tell the tale. I do think keto and low carb can be a good tool for people, particularly if you're metabolically, hitting the diabetes threshold. But yeah, I've put coconut oil in my coffee as well, and it's just hilarious when I look back now. Didn't even taste that good. Just
No.
ruined the coffee.
And it's funny to think an extra 150 calories is going to help me with my calorie deficit somehow.
But this is what happens inside the keto cult, is that they convince you that it's not got anything to do with calories. It's all about getting into ketosis, and then you do nothing but burn fat. And actually, the long-term data just doesn't support that at all.
We've talked a lot about negative things and negative stuff. Is there anyone that you really admire or you find inspirational in this space online?
Yes, there are, whether or not your audience will be familiar with them. So there is a fantastic gynecologist called Dr. Jen Gunter, who I've read a couple of her books. She's evidence-based, she's straight talking, she is quite feminist, and I think she's wonderful. So if anybody listening is interested in evidence-based women's health type topics, then I think she is fantastic. I still like Lane Norton. I listen to a lot of Lane's content, and I think he's really scientific. Menno Hensman as well. I think he speaks a lot of sense. Who else? Dr. Mike. I'm quite new to Dr. Mike, and I'm not sure whether people will know him, but I'm increasingly taking on more of what he says. I mean, I'm very still loyal to the Starting Strength organization and their wisdom around strength training. Yeah, it's boring, it's repetitive, but it works. So just get on and do it.
Yeah.
The nutrition space, I don't know. I've unfollowed a lot of people in the nutrition space, so and I've just settled on Jamie Oliver and the Batch Lady, because to me they just make food simple and tasty, and that's what food needs to be more than anything. So I don't really consume too much content about nutrition purism, because it just irritates me. They're probably my top people. But to be honest, as my audience has grown, whenever I go on, because I used to, get most of this content off of Instagram, I have so many messages in Instagram now that by the time I've answered them all, I've had enough of it, and I tend to close it down. So now I rely on stuff that people send me, which is all manner of different bonkers and claims. And then, the rest I get on YouTube, but YouTube's probably a bit better at sending you stuff that's more aligned to what you like. Yeah, so I'm not seeing as much of the nonsense as I would have done perhaps 18 months ago.
Fair. I'd try and use Instagram as little as I possibly can, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's loads of other stuff we could have talked about, but I'll respect your time. It's been a really good conversation. So thank you for coming on.
I hope people find it useful.
I
Sorry if I've burst a few bubbles about stuff that people want to believe in, but there's no harm in, if you can afford taking something, then just take it.
Is there anything else you would like to mention, or anything else that you think people should know that we haven't talked about?
Not really. I would say that I think people should trust what they feel deep down a little bit more. The amount of people I talk to who go, you see, I thought that was a scam, or I thought that was nonsense, but then you get more and more persuaded, and actually just press pause and zoom out. If your gut feeling says this is probably bullshit, it probably is, because there is no one thing, and look out for people who list lots of generic symptoms. And by that, what do I mean medically? Things like fatigue, bloating, brain fog. If a patient comes in and describes those symptoms to me, I immediately have to clarify what they mean by it, because the danger is you assume that we mean the same thing. And these terms have exploded online, thrown in with some scientific terminology, and then suddenly there's a simple solution to all of it. And the reality is there isn't. A lot of those things, we all get some brain fog, we all get tired, we all get achy, we all get some bloating from time to time. Those things aren't necessarily a pathology. And so if somebody's offering you something that fixes it all, that's a huge, huge red flag. And I would say, accept what is normal a lot of the time. Well, not accept it, but accept that there may not be a quick solution, because it's part of being human a lot of the time.
I think what you said about trusting your instincts, I see that a lot with data. People don't trust the body. Your body's clever, right? And it gives you clues. If you wake up and feel well rested, it doesn't matter what your sleep score was. Your body is telling you you've had a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And I think part of this obsession with like analysis and data leads people to tune out from their body's natural clues.
And something I've probably not said, which what is worth saying, is that I think it's really important for people to identify where their body holds stress. I talk to patients about this all of the time because it's very individual. And I'm always surprised by how people can get sometimes even into their 60s and they've still not really nailed down that, actually, when I'm stressed, this is where it manifests in my body, whether it's neck pain, headaches, rashes, gut symptoms. And sometimes these symptoms can be really quite florid. So from general practice, because we see people again, sometimes over 10, 15 years, you start to see the puzzle pieces forming in their medical record to the point that, and I've used this example a few times, I have seen female patients who will come in at a quite predictable time of year when the school holidays have finished, because actually over the summer their routine has changed and they've perhaps been spinning loads of plates with work and childcare and keeping everybody happy and entertained. And by September, they've got a same predictable set of symptoms that have appeared again. And I go, what goes on in your life around September time that this keeps, flaring up, your joints are aching again? So that our bodies are very reliable indicators of what's going on, but we're not tuned in sometimes to the signals. And then if you throw in all the noise from the online space that says, well, that could be serious, you've just crowded out all of those subtle signs. So I would like people to actually trust themselves and trust their bodies a little bit more and pay attention to what perhaps subtle signals might be getting drowned out or scrolled past or drunk away. Alcohol's another topic, but anyway, we won't get into that.
Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, Instagram and Facebook seems to be my biggest audience. Prescription Strength UK on Instagram. I have got a YouTube channel which is growing slowly. I'm trying to put content on the YouTube channel that is like a lot of people, a bit more long form. So I've got various kind of 10-minute short videos that I'm building a library of, mostly so I can send my patients off and go, look, we haven't got time to talk about this, but I've done a video on it. And I do put the video episodes of my guest podcast, well, I put all my stuff on YouTube as well. So I've got a podcast, the podcast is, again, topics that we don't have time to cover in a clinic setting. So sometimes I'll get a guest on to talk about something and give it the the time that it needs. So they tend to be more clinical type topics. But it's growing. It's great. It's lovely to get feedback that people value those kind of conversations about stuff that they're perhaps not hearing from their doctor. Because there is a big overlap between health. Health is a big topic, and so we can't cover everything in medicine, and fitness and that side of the fitness space still overlaps quite a lot. So I feel like I've got a foot in both worlds, and they're more aligned than perhaps people realize. So that's the Prescription Strength podcast as well. It's easy enough to find in all the usual places.
I'll put the links in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have
Pleasure.
a great rest
Anytime.
of the week.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.